during construction so dust didn't go in it. So we'll close and seal it so dust doesn't go in it, but we don't have to certify.
Okay.
Oh,
All right.
Well,
We're
on.
good to go if
To
you
be
want to start
continued.
the meeting. Thank you,
We're
Jim.
live.
okay. All set. This open meeting of the Master Plan Implementation Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of June 16th, 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. All members of the Master Plan Implementation Committee are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order allows the Master Plan Implementation Committee to meet entirely remotely as long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. Now I need to call the roll to confirm attendance of board members. When I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Julianne Hirsch,
here.
Amy Paretsky,
Here.
Millie Milton,
Here.
Ashley Davies, we know is not here. Tracy Camerano is not here. Adrian Cost. It's not. Bill Peterson. Fran Baxtron.
Here.
Jean Kennedy. Jean Cahill.
Here.
Rick Leaf. Here. John Campbell. Not yet. Dario DeMar.
Here.
Lori Connors.
Here.
Anybody else as John or Scott here tonight, Lori?
Nobody else is here this evening.
Okay. I guess that covers that part. So we can move on with the agenda that we have for tonight's meeting. First item on the agenda is to get an update from Lori on where we stand with the RFP for the downtown master plan. So take it away, Lori.
All right, so as you know, I completed the RFP right after our last meeting. I incorporated the changes and I sent it to John Kader for his approval. He was on vacation. He did return and he has not yet given me the thumbs up for posting this in the various publications that I need to post it in. So I did follow up with him a couple of days ago, and he assured me that he was looking at the RFP and that he will get back to me shortly. So unfortunately, I have not been able to submit this on the street as of yet.
Okay. You're just going to give us a quick time frame. Let's, given the fact, let's say John does give you the go ahead early next week, what's going to be the series of events until it gets out there for people to see?
So my goal, so there are 3 publications that I have to submit to. The first publication is Goods and Services. It's a Massachusetts publication. Second publication is Combis, and then the third is the Worcester Telegram and Gazette. The Goods and Services publication is a weekly publication, and they have submission deadlines. So I can't off the top of my head remember what the period of time is in between when you submit to when it appears in the publication. If I remember correctly, it's a Thursday publication. So that is going to be the first publication I submit because all the other timing has to blend with that date. So I do have certain vendors that I'm interested in sending this to, but I can't give anybody extra time. So everything has to arrive on the same date as the Goods and Services publication. So As soon as I hear, I'm hoping that maybe he'll give me the blessing tomorrow. At the very latest on Monday, I did underscore to him that we are interested in having the kickoff date in August, because certainly I know the time is of the essence, and we really would like to have an article for the Springtown meeting. So at the very latest, we would want to have everything that we need by the end of March. So he understands that. I know he's busy, so hopefully we will hear something very soon.
And if that's the case, then most likely if we get the thing going next week, we'd probably be in a position to get submissions from vendors back sometime in July. Would that be the idea, middle of July kind of thing?
So as soon as the publication hits, I will give them 3 weeks to respond. Yeah. So if we're able to submit by the end of June, then at the worst case scenario, we're looking at 3 weeks would be July 21st.
Okay.
That would be the worst case scenario. I'm hoping that we'll be able to get something sooner than that.
Any questions? Anybody on the board for Lori about that? I see some hands up. Go ahead, Fran.
Sorry, I was trying to do a hands up. I got a thumbs up, then I couldn't get either of them down. I just wanted, it looks like the original in red, it's a 6-week process. So whatever date you get it to publish, we have to give, we're going to still give at least 6 weeks for the application to be returned.
No,
You're
I
shortening?
anticipated 3 weeks. So that's kind of the typical turnaround time from when you drop it on the street to when you receive the RFPs back. And then there's the review process. So usually that takes a couple of weeks. And then it takes a couple of weeks to actually sign the contract. So I anticipate maybe about a seven-week time frame from when it drops on the street to the actual signing of the contract and the scheduling of the kickoff meeting.
Thank you.
Julianne, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, Lori, would you mind just telling us how you envision the review process going? Is it, are we involved, or is it just staff, or?
Yeah, this was something that I talked with Rick about earlier in the week and to Ashley. Personally, this committee is a very large committee, and in the summertime it's going to be very difficult to find times that work for everybody to go through the various RFPs. So in my experience, a subcommittee would be a much more efficient way of going through the various submittals and selecting the consultants. So that is what I would propose. And it's always good to have an odd number so you don't end up with a tie vote. And my suggestion is to have no more than 5 individuals on the subcommittee. So however you want to, I assume that I would be one of the 5, but of course I don't have to be if you folks would rather select on your own. So that's my suggestion, but it really is up to you.
So when Ashley and I discussed this with Lori earlier this week, we felt that she and I as chair and vice chair, as we'll talk about later on, our roles are probably going to switch, should be on the committee, and probably 2 other members of the MPIC. So just need to figure out how we go best about selecting that. Probably the best thing is see between who's at the meeting tonight, as well as we can send an email out to people who weren't on the meeting to see who might have an interest in participating. If we happen to only get 2 people on the committee who are interested, it'll be those 2. If we have more than 2, then Lori and Ashley and I will have to figure out a way to find 2 out of the people who are interested. So as long as we have that item on the floor for discussion right now, first of all, any more questions about what this subcommittee would do? And secondly, do we have people in attendance tonight who might be interested in participating on the subcommittee? So I'll open that up to discussion. Go ahead, Frank.
All right, so I just have a follow-up question. So how much time, because the 8 of us that are here may be August vacationers, and the people that are not here are, July vacationers. So are you talking about a meet? I mean, obviously there's homework and then there's a meeting, or is there multiple meetings? Okay.
No, one, so there would be, well, I guess 2 meetings. So you would be provided with the various proposals in advance, and then there would be a report card. So you would go through and you would rate the various proposals based on the report card. So then we would meet and we would select the top candidates. So I'm not quite sure how many responses we would receive. So let's pretend we receive five responses. So we would determine who we would want to interview, whether it was 2 or 3 candidates. Then we would schedule the interviews and actually interview those candidates. So after the interviews were completed, then we would rank the candidates, and we would select the consultant that we want to go with at that same meeting. So it would be 2 meetings as well as homework.
So just to follow up, and we would want to do that before our full group met the 3rd Thursday in August, right? That would
Ideally.
be the target.
That would be the target. Yes, I would love that to happen.
Other questions?
Yeah, I got just one question. And I don't know how many people want to be involved on this, but if it was, if 7 people wanted to and they're gonna commit, why not let it be 7? I mean, because one of the reasons we're not getting a bunch of people is we're saying they might not be here, but if they say they want to be here, I'd hate to throw someone out. It just because we thought they didn't have time. So if they have time, is there a reason why not? And we might not even have 5 volunteers, but I was just curious how that plays out, or if there were 7 that wanted to and they commit, why couldn't it be? I'm picking a random number of 7.
Well, I find that the most efficient committees are small committees. It just is really difficult to get things done if it's a very large committee. And especially when you're talking about the summer holidays, if all 7 of you are not taking any vacations in August, then it'll be really easy to pinpoint a time to meet. But I know most people like to take vacations in August. So the likelihood of finding a time where all 7 people are available during the summer, I think is highly unlikely. Like, for example, I'm taking the first week of August off. So already that is a time when I'm not available. And I imagine everybody has some summer plans, summer vacation plans. So I just would hate to postpone it because we're trying to work around 7 different people's schedules. And I know I have planning board meetings, I have ZBA meetings, I have a lot of night meetings. I'm sure everyone here has nighttime commitments that they need to abide by. So my suggestion is 5, but like I said, it really is up to you folks. If you want to, postpone the selection until September, then we could do that. But that means that we wouldn't have a final report until probably April or May.
Do we have to have a minimum? Oh, I should have raised my hand, sorry.
All right, Amy, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. If Millie, if you want to go first.
No.
It doesn't
Go right
matter.
ahead.
But I was going to say, I think Lori is really important to have on the committee, and Rick and Ashley. And I was going to recommend Dario if he had the time to do it, just because he works on master plans all the time.
I
I don't know if you're
personal-
interested, Dario.
Before we move on to nominations, could I
Go
just
ahead.
ask Lori, in terms of your schedule, because it sounds like you have a lot of nighttime commitments, ideally, would you like to be able to schedule some of these meetings in the daytime?
Oh, that would be fabulous. I would love that. Yeah. It's definitely a challenge. You know, oftentimes I have 3 night meetings a week. And I have an 11-year-old, as you know. So any alleviation of the nighttime burden would be a blessing.
Sorry, I interrupted there, but I thought that maybe that could help us narrow the field.
All right. Millie, you had a comment?
Sorry?
I said Millie had a comment, I think.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. I was just curious, what if we don't get 5? Is 3 sufficient? And, or do we wait till September?
If we don't have 5 in the selection committee, I think we could absolutely go forward with 3.
Okay.
Yeah, the key is an odd number
Yep.
so that you don't have a tie. So as long as we have an odd number, you know, 3 is fine, 5 is fine.
Okay.
7 is a bit unwieldy in my opinion, but
Yep.
it's up to you.
Amy?
Yep. If someone else really wants it, they can have it, but if you want to do it during the day, I would volunteer if you need a 5th person. I read over the RFPs, RFQs for the town common, and so I'd volunteer, but only if you need me. If there isn't anyone more qualified, like I can do it.
Okay, so there's one possible candidate. Anybody else have an interest?
Fran, raising
no.
her hand.
All right, so not necessarily an interest, but just thinking about the logistics, and I do think that Amy, you would bring a value to it regardless of whether or not it's your job, because you have had that commitment before. I don't think Lori should be a voting member, though. I think it should be committee members voting under the stewardship of staff. I don't know. I mean, I'm not opposed to her having say, but I don't think she's a voting member of the master plan implementation. For that sake, I would be happy with just 3 board members and Lori, facilitating and being that expert in the process.
Yeah, that I think that's a valid point. Lori, I don't know what you're feeling about that. I mean, if you were participating as a committee member, but the committee made the selection, is that reasonable?
Well, in my experience, I have been a voting member of many boards and not boards, but committees and various selection processes. But if that's not the way things are done in Northborough, then certainly I defer to you.
As I think about that, Fran, my only counter argument to that would be Lori's going to be the person who's going to have to work with these people. I mean, we're going to be involved, but on a day-to-day basis, it's going to be Lori and the consultants. And the more I think about that, I think her opinion and her vote probably makes sense, because we don't want to be in a situation where Lori feels strongly that, consultant A is the one she could do the best with. And for some reason, the rest of us feel it's consultant B. And then, that sets up kind of an awkward working relationship for Lori. So the more I think about it, her vote probably makes sense. Go ahead, Julie.
So procedurally, if we right now have Rick, Ashley, Amy nominated Dario, but could we have an alternate so that if vacation schedules did conflict? How do you feel about that? And what is the possibility?
My reaction would be probably not a good idea. I mean, we're going to get so far down the road with one group of people and then to have somebody else. The only way that would be reasonable would be if that person would sit in on everything we're doing anyway. So I don't think alternates make sense in this case. I don't know. Other input on that?
I agree with you, Rick, on that. I think adding that layer is just a little more complex than it might be worthwhile.
And I think availability is key so that it can get done in the two meetings that Lori is, recommending. So 4 board members plus Lori who can commit to 2 daytime meetings, I think is how you go.
Yeah.
They have the interest, we all have the interest because we're all on the master plan implementation, and we know that the downtown is the primary focus initially. That's how it floated to the top. So have 4 members that can meet during the day with Lori, and then we're guaranteed to have this done by the end of August.
So I guess, Dario, in your situation, obviously you have a lot of experience with this. I guess the 2 questions would be, well, 3 questions. A, you interested? B, if you are, do you actually have the time based on everything else you're doing? And C, because you're in this business, would it be possible you would have some sort of a business relationship with somebody we might be considering that could be considered to be a conflict of interest?
It's a good question.
I guess I would go backwards from that. I don't have any business relationships with, well, I will probably have worked with all of them at one point in time in my career. So, but it doesn't affect the decisions. I don't have any relatives or friends or favorites or anything like that. And I do deal with this all the time with contractors as well, because we put them on lists, and if they're qualified, they're on the list. And if they have the best price and the best service, that's who we recommend. So there wouldn't be a conflict of interest because I don't hire them and they don't hire us. So there's never a monetary exchange between them and us. So that's one. Usually it's the client that will hire them. It's no different than a civil engineer or someone else that we would bring on board. If it's only 2 meetings, then I could certainly serve. If someone else wants to, that's fine. But if it's 2 meetings, it's important to me to do right by the town, I would serve. But if, like I said, if someone else wants to, I'm okay not doing it, but I would do it if I volunteered for this to try to help. So I guess that's part of my responsibility. And I do have a full-time job. So, and I'm only
Could you make time? Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, could you make time during the day if we had daytime meetings?
Yeah, it would depend. It would depend what day it was and what time.
Yeah.
But yeah, in some cases I prefer the daytime. Because I get to spend more time with my family at night.
So one way we could do this, I suppose, would be to decide tonight to make the subcommittee up of Ashley, Amy, Dario, and myself, and just leave it at that as the members who are present at the meeting tonight. I don't think that would cause major heartburn for people who are not. The other way we could do this is to say this is the current thinking, but send an email to the board members who weren't here. Though I'm not sure if that then violates open meeting laws. If we somehow, appoint someone else through email as opposed to in a public meeting like this, the more I think about it, I don't know. For those of you, Fran or Amy or Lori, that are involved with this, any feeling about whether we could actually appoint someone outside of this meeting, or do we need to do this in the meeting itself?
I think you need to do it at a meeting.
Yeah.
The other thing is, with Ashley's new job, do you know that she can commit to daytime? Because that's just something came up while we were talking tonight.
I could confirm that with her. She and I talked about this after we got off the phone with Lori, and she said she wanted to do it. So I would assume she could make the time, but I could confirm that with her. But well, I guess for the purpose of the meeting tonight, I would entertain a motion that we appoint a subcommittee of Lori, Ashley, Amy, Dario, and Rick to review the responses to the RFPs, conduct interviews, and are we going to say select a consultant or recommend a consultant to the full board for a vote? How does that work, Laura? Would your feeling be that the full board would cede responsibility to the subcommittee to make the selection?
Yes, that's the way I envision it, because of course the full board the full committee would not be privy to the various proposals and also wouldn't be there for the interviews. So I don't think it'd really be fair to push the burden on the full committee when they don't have the full range of information.
All right, so go ahead, Dario.
Is there a reason we can't send it to the full board, and at least if they have comments, they can tell one of the five of us? Or does that not make sense? Because, Julian or Fran could come up with a great idea / question, and then it never gets dealt with because they never got to see it. I don't know. To me, I like more opinions, the better. And then the five of us would then obviously listen, but I don't know how that happens like in official meetings. I just don't like everybody not seeing what's going on for some reason, but I'm not a good public person. I don't know how these rules work. So
Well, everything is part of the public record, right? All the applications and stuff?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
so, and because we do everything on Zoom, everything's going to be posted electronically.
perfect.
I think we're complicating things. I think that the idea of a subcommittee is to make it streamlined. If we nominate people because of their interest and availability, we're charging them with that responsibility, and we put our faith in their due diligence. Other than the fact that I don't think staff is a voting member, but other than that, I think it makes a lot of sense for it to just be the 5 people voting and recommending it forward.
Julian?
So I tend to agree with you, Fran, about in Northborough, actually, we usually have staff as the advisor, and it's clearly, a hugely important role, but as a voting member, it's unusual. So while we're here tonight, like Jean, Millie, Fran, are you willing to be the 5th person on this? I can't do it, but
I'd rather just leave it to Amy, Rick, and Ashley. The 3 of them under Lori's guidance.
And Dario.
Well, that would make 4, so that's why I didn't pick. I picked 3 voting members of the master plan, and staff guiding and recommending and influencing, but not voting. And the 3 of you then vote on behalf of the committee.
I think the 4 would be okay. Like, I don't think we'd have a tie. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I don't think we should have the number of people who vote should be an odd number. The question comes back to, does Lori get a vote or not? And we've got some differing opinions on that right now.
If it came down to that, I would think Lori should vote then, because of course I recommend Dario. I don't want to lose him. I think he probably has better input than I would in reading these, because he does it all the time.
So Julianne, just get back to you. I mean, you represent the Board of Selectmen. Do you think from your perspective and the way the town does business, this is extremely unusual, could cause concerns, back with the town if the planner has a vote on this committee?
it's not extremely unusual. But like, at our selectmen meetings, it's just the selectmen who vote. But this is different. This is a subcommittee, and I think the probability, as Amy said, of a tie is going to be unusual, and maybe we could just set it up that Lori would be the tiebreaker.
Well, Mr. Chair, just thinking about it, now just go totally opposite. When we had the master plan steering committee, we didn't select VIP or VP. I don't remember their initials.
I don't think it's really
VHP,
typical
yeah,
that
the staff
committee
did.
selects the consultant. So when you think of the Complete Streets
Mhm.
consultant that was selected by staff, when you think of the consultants who, I'm not sure about the common project, but the playground project that was done by staff. So I'm not suggesting that I would be a voting member of the master plan implementation committee, just the selection of the consultant. Because I have a lot of experience dealing with the various planning and engineering consultants. So and obviously I've already done a downtown revitalization project. So that is why I would like to have a vote, but certainly I defer to you.
When we did the
Right.
town common, the committee, we all read the RFPs and RFQs, and we had 2 people who joined the interviews, but it was really DPW who selected. Like, we didn't really have a vote, I don't think. It was just, we all came to the same conclusion, though, when we saw the RFPs that came in. Everybody did like the same one, but it was definitely staff that selected and worked with the people.
Well, I think in this particular situation, based on what the MPIC was charged with doing, I think the idea of having an odd number of people and having the planner have a vote on the committee seems to make the most sense to me. So I would recommend that whatever we move basically says that this 5-person group, 4 MPIC members and the planner would review the RFPs. As Fran said, the RFPs will become sort of public knowledge. If other people on the committee want to look at them and comment, they're free to do that during the review period. And then the committee would vote and select, the subcommittee would vote and select the consultant, with the town planner having a vote on that committee. So if that seems acceptable, I'll entertain such a motion so we can move this forward. Anyone
Yeah.
like to move that?
Okay, Mr. Chair, I
Yes.
move that we create the subcommittee selection, selection subcommittee for the downtown revitalization project to be members Dario Demara, Amy Paretsky, Rick Leaf, and Ashley,
Davies?
thank you, Davies, and Lori Connors.
Second,
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? Let me call the roll here. I guess I have to do this. Let me get my list here again. Julianne,
yes.
Amy,
Aye.
Millie? Millie?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Who else we got here? Where's the rest of my list? Fran,
Yes,
Rick, yes, Dario.
Yes.
Okay, so
Jean Cahill is here.
I'm sorry, Jean. I'm sorry.
Hi.
Jean, I'm sorry. I didn't see your face on the screen. I'm sorry, Jean. Okay, so at this point, the ball's kind of in Lori's court to twist John's arm to the point where he finally says, go ahead and do this. And then we'll wait for Lori to let us know when things go out and when we can expect information to come back. Okay, thank you
Absolutely.
all.
I'll
That was
keep
a
you
good
posted.
discussion. Okay, next item on the agenda is to get an RFP on Complete Streets. There was a meeting on June 2nd that Lori attended, so she can update us on what happened on June 2nd. Go ahead, Lori.
Sure. So there were 4 of us that met. So it was a consultant from Woodward and Curran, Scott, Fred, and I. And we were brainstorming various ideas for projects. So we used a series of maps in order to identify kind of gaps in the sidewalk system and issues with problem intersections, potential bike lanes, and the like. So we identified, I believe it originally was 25 projects. And then I think we ended up adding a couple of additional projects at the end. So it was probably 27 to 28 projects. for the consultant from Woodward and Curran to research. So she is going back to the drawing board. She is doing assessments of the various projects. And we also talked about the public component and what that would consist of. And so we will likely meet again to refine the projects. We were talking about the fact that that list was very kind of unwieldy, but we are interested in having a large array of projects because, of course, in order to get funding for various projects as they come up, we want to have them on our prioritization plan. So it's not necessarily wise to limit the number of projects. You kind of want to throw everything onto the prioritization plan and then prioritize the various projects from there. So one of the things we were talking about is narrowing the list to 15 projects and then having a public outreach session where folks would be able to vote and identify the top projects that they're interested in. So we included projects that are already in the mix, like, of course, downtown revitalization. We broke downtown revitalization into a few different projects. We included the multi-purpose trail over the aqueduct. We also included the senior center project. So I think you'll be happy with the array of projects that we picked. And I think that we were happy with how productive the meeting was. So I think it was a good starting point. But we're definitely not ready to go public with it yet. There is some more work that needs to be done. We were talking about how we would present the various projects to the public to have them voted on. We were talking about taking photos so that folks who weren't necessarily familiar with all of the various aspects of town would be able to familiarize themselves before the vote. And we had all sorts of different types of projects. So one of the projects that we identified was a street lighting project for the downtown. We also talked about like a bike facilities project, which would include like bike racks and, bike repair stations. Certainly crosswalks were something that we discussed. We discussed crosswalks that might need some like rapid flashing lights to make them safer. Speed limit signs that flashed. So it was an interesting meeting and helpful, for me. We actually got the GIS out and we were looking at the various intersections using the GIS. So very productive.
Thanks. Questions or comments for Lori about complete streets?
Lori, I have a quick question on the, in your master plan revitalization it was in Grafton, Millbury.
Yep.
Did you guys do a complete streets program? You worked with that, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
So we were already pretty far along with our downtown revitalization project. So we had already gone through the visioning exercise. So we had a project that was coming along. So what we did is we divvied up that project into various phases. And we made sure that those various phases were in our top 5 prioritization list.
Okay.
Because the Complete Streets program looks at your prioritization list when they're deciding whether or not you should get funding. So they like to fund projects that are in your top few.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Trent.
All right, thank you. So you said that we're going to put a lot of projects forward because we're hoping that they will then pick the ones that they perceive as our top priorities and maybe a few extras or not, right? This way here we get the most out of there. Does it make sense for us to take those same projects and recommend them through the community meeting next week for potential ARPA funded projects? This way here, if they don't all get approved, is there a timeline advantage to saying, well, okay, we put up 15 to complete streets, they're only okaying 5 of them, but maybe 3 more can be from ARPA funding or something like that?
Oh, that's a very good question. The ARPA funding is obviously a very important resource for funding. The important thing for the Complete Streets program is Complete Streets pays a little bit for design, but a lot for construction. So when you're thinking about ARPA funding, that might be a good resource for design, where we could rely on Complete Streets for actual construction, as well as Chapter 90 funds. So the design money is a challenge. So next week is a really, really short time frame because we really aren't ready, I don't think. We haven't done our visioning exercise, so we haven't been able to narrow down any of the projects to identify what the top goals are. So I kind of hesitate to say, well, let's go forward with these projects, because right now they're just projects in the minds of Scott, Fred, and I. So I wish that the ARPA visioning was a little bit further down the line so that we'd be a little bit further in the process of the prioritization plan. So,
Could I just interrupt for a second? Could I just interrupt? I got a text from John Campbell. He's waiting to get into the meeting.
Oh yeah, I see him. There, I just admitted him.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
And knocking at the door.
Amy, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing you did.
Thanks. Okay. Okay, any other questions or comments about Complete Streets? I think it'll be interesting to see what the project looks like. And talking to Amy about it earlier this week, it seems like there are a number of things related to the master plan as far as, bikeability and connectivity between the downtown and other areas. I think, Laura, you also mentioned something about trying to get better connectivity between the parking at Assabet Park down to the Common, which I think would be a great thing to do.
Yes, absolutely. That was one of the projects that we included. So we were really mindful to think of projects that would advance the downtown revitalization. So one of the projects was replacing the sidewalks from along South Street from Main Street to Gale. Also installing a sidewalk on Gale Street. We had talked, of course, Amy and I have talked separately about the need to have a real efficient connection from the Assabet parking lot to the Common. So that was one thing we discussed. As well as the pedestrian scale lighting is important. We talked about that for like the Pierce Street location.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I have a question, actually.
Go ahead, Jean.
So is Complete Streets both rebuilding existing sidewalks? It sounds like it is based on what you just described, or is it for the purpose of installing new bike lanes, new sidewalks?
Yes and no. So they do not like to replace existing sidewalks, except in circumstances where, like in a downtown, you have a sidewalk that is not ADA compliant. So they will make the exception in that case. So if you have non-ADA compliant sidewalks and ramps or a lack of ramps, crosswalks, then they will allow that. But they prefer to fund projects that are kind of dealing with gaps in the sidewalk network. Like they, I'm sure, would love the Gale Street project because there currently isn't a sidewalk and there also isn't a municipal parking lot that provides access to the common. So that's something that would appeal to them. They also like to fund projects that deal with affordable housing, so connections to housing authority properties, low-income neighborhoods, senior accommodations. Those tend to rank pretty high.
Okay. Any other comments or questions, Amy, about complete streets? Okay, so we'll see what comes out, what gets announced for the public meeting. And once again, I think we should sort of keep this on the agenda on an ongoing basis, see what's going on and how we can make sure that ideas from the master plan, you know, over time are considered in the rollout of this updating of walkability and bikeability around the town, especially. And I'm sure once we start working on the downtown, a whole series of recommendations are going to come out in the downtown. That's a big issue in the downtown study. So those will have to get folded in at some point once we have the consultant on the job there. So, okay, next item on the agenda is a continued discussion on the preliminary boundary for the downtown. So I guess, can somebody get the map back up somehow?
Yep, I can share it.
Okay.
Let's see if this works, Amy.
Okay, I'll wait.
See if you can share.
You want me to share? Okay.
If you have trouble, let me know. I'll make you co-host.
Did it work?
And
Oh,
yeah.
beautiful. Nice job, Amy. Okay, so where we kind of left off at the last meeting is we kind of talked about the color coding. Once again, you know, the red lines are areas that pretty much everybody on the committee had suggested being part of the downtown. The orange were people that, you know, I think there were, I can't remember how many respondents there were, but everybody that responded the same as in red, and pretty much everybody was orange, and then yellow was a couple less people, and green was only one or two people kind of thing. So the way we kind of left it was, it seems like there's definitely consensus around what we consider to be the core downtown right now. But I'd be interested, Millie and John Campbell and people who weren't at the meeting last time, Fran, to basically, you know, give some comments also as to if you had proposed areas outside of the red and the orange, kind of what you had in mind kind of thing. So I don't know, Millie, any input you want to provide as to things you suggested?
I pretty much have the same ideas where most the red and orange is. There were a couple of on I think on Dario's plan that I kind of liked as sort of focal centers. Does this one cover over by the aqueduct? And this one doesn't? Okay.
It doesn't really include that. The last meeting, we talked about the fact that some of Dario's tentacles pointed out areas that were important to be able to get access to from the downtown, but not necessarily being in the downtown.
Okay. All right. And that was kind of what I was trying to drive at, is that, you know, maybe there can be a way to draw attention to those areas, but not necessarily make them be in the boundaries or the zones of a downtown.
Yeah. Okay. That's kind of consistent with what we were talking about last time.
Okay.
I think, the Dario button in, I kind of look at it, if you've ever gone out to Europe about anywhere and you walk in these old hill towns, it's pretty amazing that you have, you know, and I always walk to them instead of taking the trains or buses, but you go through the farms and the area where a lot of people live. Then you hit the town wall. Then you hit the fortress within the town.
Mhm.
And in a weird way, we're kind of composing the town wall, and to reach out to things like White Cliffs or the park on 135 or the aqueduct, that town wall would have big arched openings. And that's what these, how, as Rick defines them, my tentacles would reach out. So there's a way for them to squeeze out of the town wall. But we highlight that if you go this way, it would really be cool because you could walk along the Assabet River,
Right.
enjoy that amenity, get all the way out to the aqueduct. So I think the downtown by definition is that inner wall, but the arches, the wayfinding, the paving, the trees will point to those openings that take us to other highlights within the town that are not in the quote unquote downtown.
Great.
John Campbell, any further input as to things you suggested that maybe are not red or orange?
Well, I'm going to go a little off the script that you've been talking about. If you'll give me a second, I'm sorry to miss the last meeting. I did listen to the whole thing.
Yeah.
Sorry to be late tonight, but I found while everybody was describing their vision based on boundaries and where the streets go, and I did the same thing. I was, in my mind, it came down to really where you can walk to downtown and so on, and how you enhance that. But I went back to the goals section of the master plan implementation and was reading it. And when you reread it, it sort of drives you toward the ideas and less to the boundaries. And I felt like in some senses we were getting a little off track by trying to define certain streets, but instead of what the master plan was driving us to. The land use goal 2 is the one that sort of defines the start of what we're talking about. And paraphrasing, enhance downtown, enabling it to become the community's proud central gathering area. And, a central gathering area is not places all over the map here, but instead, how do we drive more people to walk downtown, get to downtown, stop in downtown, improve what it looks like and what services are there, given that the Route 20 is what it is, and we're not going to change traffic significantly, but if you give drivers options to pull off and park in different places. You just touched on probably one of the major, easily in the top 10 things that the town would like to do. How do you connect Assabet Park with the beautiful town common now? How do you get sidewalks there? We've been talking about that for several years, and in Open Space Committee and Community Preservation after the town common got started. And, so as one example, those are the kinds of things I would focus on, because they satisfy goals of the master plan, where walkability, connection, and the town common was obviously one of the best things we've done in downtown in many years. So, when you look at that area, I just kept thinking, what is it we're looking for the consultant to do with our downtown study? And it's to, drive big ideas on how we make these areas look better. So in general, my comment is that my personal focus is on very much in the middle of downtown. How do you make that better, more walkable? How can you expand some of the unused areas? How do we get the business owners that either are active or inactive in their properties? Again, example, that same area of town. What's going on with the old Bank of America building? That passage through that was the old driveway in and out of there. How does that become part of the connection to the common? Is it possible? or do we make that a street? You know, what are the really long-term views for that area? And then you sort of, in my mind, I'm taking that same view of, you know, Pierce Street and that area over there. Seems a lot of unbuilt potential there and so on. So I'm very much focused on the very middle and not things that are outstanding. I think those are all areas that touch on different parts of the master plan, but I feel like the downtown study should focus on the goal of enabling downtown to become a central gathering area.
Okay,
So I don't know if that was helpful, but that's what my mind has been thinking about while I listen to our descriptions, you know, the various descriptions.
that's very helpful. Okay. Fran, comments?
It's so funny because it's so hard to try to figure out what we think we want and not look at the streets. I do agree with John that the dark red is a doable area, right? It's hard not to include what's on the outliers, but it's all residential, and we're not going to change Summer Street and School Street to being non-residential. We may encourage some in-home occupations that are, you know, gift shoppy-ish or, you know, of interest for people to walk. But I think, I mean, it's not really, I mean, I walk Summer Street, that whole area, it's under 2 miles, it's a big loop. I think that realistically, our gathering spot is going to be that that dark red, and everything else should be enhanced and improved as we can, or maintain the historic nature of the homes along Summer Street and School Street. That's probably the most beautiful piece of area we have. So I wouldn't want to see it anything but what it already is, really, with just some modest, you know, maybe restrictions on external development. So, I mean, a gathering place would be that intersection. We just have to do something about making it safe and walkable or inviting.
Yeah.
Yeah, Fran, just building on your thought there, when I drew the boundary, so to speak, and I include all of Summer Street and within there, it's because that's the kind of neighborhood that if you do live there or you wanted to live there, that you'd want to, you know, you can walk to downtown. And so, not that those are the only people, but, you know, that's the walkable part of town that brings you into downtown. Not that you would change anything about it, but that it really is, you know, part of our downtown neighborhoods compared to the other subdivisions outside of town.
I agree.
I agree. I actually grew up on Church Street, and we walked all the time when I was little. My mother would walk us, and we would go to the Assabet Park, the library, all the different stores down there. So I do agree. Those neighborhoods are the ones who will walk down and use. And once our complete streets gets up and running, then maybe the outlying neighborhoods can all connect to the downtown too.
But we also need to make it available to people coming into the town, right? So that goes back to our on-street parking.
Yep.
And someplace where they want to drive to, right? And then park their cars and go to various places.
Right, there's no doubt there's a combination of making sure that the neighborhoods that are currently walkable have good facilities for doing that. And then this bigger issue, which is bringing people in from further away, either by bike or by car, having a way for them to put their vehicle someplace and then take advantage of whatever we can do in that downtown area. So there's a couple of different ways of looking at that. Obviously, the management of vehicular traffic is going to be, you know, more difficult, but I agree that all these neighborhoods that are in the vicinity of this area we're talking about, we should make sure that it's very easy to get people from those neighborhoods, you know, into this town center we're going to develop. Other comments, other members on the board? I don't have a thing to see if hands are up, so if anybody's got something to say, they can just blurt it out. I guess the other thing we're thinking about is the whole purpose of this exercise was to give the consultant on the first day at least kind of an outline of what we had in mind, as opposed to just say start with the town of Northborough and do something. So the whole idea here was the purpose of this exercise was to get some consensus among the committee to say, from the committee standpoint, when you say downtown, this is kind of what we're thinking about. So, at this point, as opposed to drawing a line around something, it might make sense just to start with this map for the consultant with the same thing we've been talking about. These are areas that had the most consensus. These are areas that, for one reason or another, people thought ought to be made sure were considered, and just have the consultant kind of start with this map the way it is. Any comments about, would this be a good thing to give the consultant as a day one thing, or do people have ideas about something else that'd be more effective?
I think, Rick, it's a fine starting point. And once again, not to be redundant, but if you take the master plan implementation guide and you start reading down some of the points, they drive you to the different things we want to do in this area. And those would be the guides we'd want to have that person follow, and then get into the nitty gritty. How do you accomplish some change in downtown? And in my head, it keeps coming back to current properties and property owners, and what leverage or encouragement could be given to change some of what's existing that either doesn't look good or is unutilized. And I don't know the answer to that. And I don't know. We talked about that during the RFP discussion, how many meetings would be with property owners and other stakeholders and so on. But that seems very key to me.
Yeah. Other comments?
Oh, are we just supposed to speak up?
Yeah, I guess like I said, I don't have any way to see the hand raised feature here, so just speak up.
Okay, so we did make a lot of comments about capitalizing on the river. And are we saying tonight that would be a phase later in the master plan, or do we want the consultant to consider that highly?
I think that would certainly come out. I know there's been a lot of comment about it. And if you look at the red line that's going east from the center of town, it extends down, to the river. So I think the point we definitely made that we want to take a look at how to really that whole loop from where the river is east of town and Cold Harbor Brook that's coming in the other way behind the fire station and kind of meeting up with the river around Hudson Street. How do you include something, if you could include something around those bodies of water? I know at the last meeting, Dario talked about walks he's taken, maybe trespassing on some property here and there, but kind of walking along the riverbank. There's definitely potential there. And I talked about, I've been behind the fire station, looked at some real potential to do some things around the brook back there, maybe even starting as far back as the Church Street Bridge. So as you look at the map, there's a definite kind of loop of blue that's coming in, from towards the river and the river itself. So I think my perspective would be that's something we'd encourage the consultant to look into and see what we could do about leveraging that.
I wonder if we should put a red around to include the river so they know, like make this a triangle and then also include the fire station. Just make the red so they know it's not just the streets. It also includes the river and the properties near the river. Do we need to go that far, or we can do that when we talk to them afterwards?
I guess I'm going to butt in for 2 seconds. I think John is spot on the definition of the downtown and what it is and the focus. When I read through the whole master plan, there was a lot about the downtown, but all the bullets I put when I did my initial map came from the master plan. They weren't things that I made up. And some of those were the river. Some of it was White Cliffs. Some of it was the aqueduct. I mean, we got the aqueduct, I keep saying, on the front page of everything to do with Northborough and how it could not be part of this, I think would be horrible because it's one of the most beautiful assets we have in Northborough. But when we define the downtown, if we give them this map to speak to both Amy's and Millie's and Rick's point, there's nothing wrong with giving them this and then putting a little arrow, whatever color you want to make it, pointing at the river, the aqueduct, the park on 135, whatever other things, so that they can keep that in the back of their mind when they're focusing on the downtown. And then it doesn't get left behind where they're like, oh my God, we wanted to have a long trail, but we didn't know you had anything to go see. And all of a sudden, at least you let them know these things are out there, like downtown with the Freedom Trail in Boston, you can get out all the way out to the ship, but that's a special trip. And it's not necessarily downtown, but it's a big piece. The Constitution is a big piece of Boston's history, as the aqueduct, the river, the Weston House are a significant piece of our history. So I think downtown, this map is great for that. Maybe we do put a red line going out as far as River Street so someone could walk that triangle. And yeah, and hopefully get a path behind Harvey's and enjoy that river and the confluence of Colbert going into the Assabet. But there's like two different subjects. There's the whole master plan. There's the focus on the downtown. And I think they should know everything, but let them know our focus is on the downtown, because you don't want them to not capitalize on an opportunity or an asset that we have that makes Northborough, Northborough. That's it.
Yeah. So Lori, what's your input? Do you think we need to modify the map? Or do you think the way we have the map now works with then on the initial meeting with the consultant, pointing out, these different areas of interest that at least ought to be considered as part of their evaluation?
I think that we can articulate to them, like the river, the red areas go to the river. So I think it's clear that the river is an important piece of the downtown. The aqueduct is a bit further afield, and I understand that it's a very important and key piece, as well as a potential attraction. But I don't really think that it's in the downtown. So we're not, putting like a moat around this area. So just because we don't include the aqueduct in the downtown study doesn't mean that it's not a really important part that we want to highlight and showcase. But it is further afield. So I would be concerned about diverting attention away from the downtown to make the connection to the aqueduct, because that isn't so pedestrian friendly. The downtown, in my mind, is a place that is kind of the civic and commercial core of Northborough. So the aqueduct is a really important open space resource, but it's not in that category of being, within the core. So I think we can have that conversation to say, certainly that the aqueduct is really important. So maybe we need to do wayfinding to include that in like a signage plan, but not focus on like some of the other key parts that are going to be part of this project, which is pedestrian scale lighting, the concrete sidewalks with the vertical granite curb, the dense mixed use residential, commercial, civic. That's kind of my input.
I think the comment about wayfinding makes sense. I think that gets to Dario's point about sort of the arches in the wall around the town, sort of leading you out to where some of these things are outside of the downtown that that if we can do some sort of signage and wayfinding in the downtown that makes apparent these things are available and where they are and how to get to them, and maybe over time, the downtown and complete streets come together in that we build more and more accessible ways to get through these arches in the wall around the downtown, using that metaphor again, to get out to these things that we're wayfinding for.
And just quickly to remember, we just approved at town meeting an additional consultant, a separate consultant for the aqueduct. So, you know, that project is being pursued already and does not need to be the focus, as Lori said, of the downtown consultant. But I would assume the downtown consultant will get apprised of or will learn of all the current programs already ongoing, like complete streets and aqueduct trail connection capabilities. So those things are going to be ongoing anyway, right?
Correct.
But still, over time, as we improve the downtown, if we can improve walkability and bikeability from the town center to the aqueduct, to Ellsworth McAfee Field, you know, to the White Cliffs, depending, you know, what the town ends up doing with that, if anything, over time. So that ability to, over time, move from the center out to these resources, I think is important. And certainly, as Lori mentioned, if wayfinding can be set up to make it apparent where these things are, how to get to them, and then make it easier to get to them over time, that all fits into the bigger view of the master plan anyway, because walkability and bikeability are a big part, you know, separate from the downtown, but still a big part of what the plan was trying to get at.
And I think, Rick, that's the key. By definition, master plan is just that. It includes everything. And our priority, without a doubt, is the downtown with what we're doing right now. But if you're doing a master plan and you're not looking at everything, you don't want to find out later on, oh my God, I wish we would have thought about that ahead of time. So, and I'm not by any stretch of the imagination saying the aqueduct should be our focus, but I also think it would be grossly negligent to not talk about it when you're doing any part of a master plan, whether it's downtown, the streets, the sidewalks, trails, open area. That's the whole point of the master plan, is to make sure you consider everything. Without a doubt, at this point, the focus is these red streets. But you can't let somebody else do something and then all of a sudden say, oh, now how do we connect that? We decided to make all those sidewalks out of slate, and now over here we're trying to do everything concrete with red brick. And then when they hit each other, it's like two countries with different flags. So I think it's a big deal to just keep everything under our umbrella, by definition, the master plan, and then focus on the downtown. I just would hate to see something like that not get incorporated, because I've been there with master plans. When they concentrate on one thing and they say, okay, now how are we going to put the theater in? And it's too late because someone wanted to put a cool pond in front of another building, and now the theater doesn't fit. So you end up carrying out something that you just put in to make the next step fit it. And that's all I'm going with this. I agree downtown should be our focus, but I also would strongly urge we don't leave anything off the table for that consultant, just so they know in the back of their mind when they're laying it out that this should all tie together in time.
But I guess, Rick, if I can, I mean, that is the focus of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. This RFP is specifically about the revitalization of the downtown. So we can't lose focus of the entire master plan, but this is not a master plan proposal that we're putting forward. It's supposed to be the focus on the downtown. So, I mean.
And I think that's what Dario's saying, but I think that's a job that we have as the committee, is once we hire a consultant and we start working with the consultant, you know, on the actual planning and getting reports and updates from the consultant, we can provide information that we think is important to consider about other aspects of the plan that the downtown may touch, kind of thing. So I agree with you, Fran. The focus is definitely on the downtown, but, you know, if anybody knows what's in the plan, it's us. And so I agree with Dario's point that to the extent that we think not doing anything, but at least consideration of setting up the pathway to something else in the plan down the road, should be discussed and considered to make sure we don't create a dead end or something that's not going to work in the future. So,
And I agree with Fran too. The focus is the downtown. You just don't go in blind. That's all I'm saying, is just to make sure we know that stuff's aware, and let them know that we have other things other than the downtown when they're doing the downtown. And I'll go back to the metaphor, so they know where to put the arch in the wall. That's all I'm looking for. Because then they'll say, oh boy, wish we would have had an arch here. Now we got to tear it all down. But agree 100%. For this study, we're looking at these red lines, and all I'm saying is, when I do a master plan, we always ask, what do you want in the future? So that when we do the focus, when we do the downtown, the future stuff is being considered. We're not going to put lamps out by the aqueduct now or in front of White Cliffs, but at least we know those are there. I think we're all on the same page, actually.
yeah. And I think something else we'll have to manage going forward. Anybody who's done project work is familiar with the term scope creep. You start saying this is what you're going to do, and when you get into it, well, maybe we can do this, maybe we can do this, maybe we can do this, and all of a sudden, a project that's supposed to cost $250,000 now costs $750,000. So one thing we're going to have to do, and I'm sure Lori will keep us honest in this, is kind of manage to make sure we're not getting a lot of scope creep into this. But by the same token, it is important to make sure that this sets the stage. It does something particular, and it helps us set the stage for the next things at the same time.
Did you call that skull creep?
Scope creep.
Oh.
I almost wonder, not to go back here, but should the red line just go a little farther? Like, I feel like this property could be part of the downtown, and it stops right
that area, so that everyone knows that we want it incorporated. It's going to need more work, but
because this is a property. When that lease ends, it could be a big key piece. So I don't know if you'd want to stop before you get to it.
I'd like it to go out to there if it was up to me.
Yeah. Because then you have, like you talked about, there's the waterfall here, there's the river, there's a waterfall over here. So you hate to stop short of it. Because last time, a lot of people keyed in on it, that's a piece.
Can I interject? I think back to what John Campbell pointed out as these two kind of dark red polygons as our kind of downtown commercial civic, kind of open space meeting areas. That's our opportunity to kind of perhaps rethink those uses and those areas into the future to, toward a unified vision. And then I think when you go out to the waterways, circling the downtown, you have kind of that's like our second sphere of focus and of potential and natural resource integration into the downtown that I think, to kind of set up like a two-tiered, approach, the functional areas of a downtown that attract people to come park and shop, walk around, but then the outer areas as the consultant could be kind of drawn, that attention to whatever opportunities these bring in to augment that center. Please include those in this scope.
And once again, this map is nothing more than a representation of the people who responded, what they indicated in their particular maps or descriptions. So the fact that, let's say, the red line on Hudson Street doesn't go down a river is because only of the respondents, I think the yellow is probably somewhat half or less than half pointed that out. Most of them stopped, where that line is. So this is just a representation of what people voted for. It doesn't mean that based on our discussion tonight, we can't sort of describe this a little bit differently. I mean, I'm hearing a lot of input around making sure the consultant's aware that the river and the brook, are important and need to be considered. So I don't think there'd be a major objection if somehow some sort of indication on the map pointed that out, either a dotted line or continuing the red line. But once again, all these lines are showing is how people voted.
Mhm.
Yep. I didn't vote, actually. I agreed with other people, so I probably should have.
Yeah. No,
I
well,
just
once
thought,
again,
this is, what everybody sent in was really good.
I don't know, Lori, once again, your perspective, I could see making some indication on the map about, the brook and the river as it sort of goes around what we consider to be the downtown area, calling that out in the map that we give to the consultants. What's your opinion?
I think it's fine to maybe include, like, even if you wanted to make that mill area orange, kind of give them the direction that the primary study area is the red area, but the other orange areas are kind of secondary. So they're part of the downtown, but they're not the focus of the study.
Yeah. So that kind of gets to Jean Cahill's point about, primary and secondary.
Right.
And
So we
did we
could do-
decide last time this orange part was gonna come out because it's just the residential? Or are we gonna leave it?
I think it was discussed that would come out last time.
But leaving it orange, doesn't that then show that it had some interest because of its walkability, to John's point, but not necessarily the focus?
I think the important thing for this study is to focus in on the transformation possibilities. So to Amy's point, the mill building has, and there's a large parcel, there's a 13-acre parcel across the street from that mill building. So it has a lot of redevelopment possibility. Whereas Summer Street is already a built-up residential area, so it's unlikely to be redeveloped. Would you folks agree with that statement?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're really, other than making sure that the sidewalk is, in decent shape, and that there are crosswalks and that there are ADA compliant ramps, there really aren't any other opportunities, I suppose, for downtown revitalization there. So I suppose what I would suggest is, let's focus, if we're going to include outlying areas, they should be the ones that have redevelopment opportunity, or, maybe they're a gateway. Like, for example, that bridge, there's that nice little triangle. It's a memorial park at the intersection of Church and Whitney Street. And then there's the beautiful bridge that was replaced in 2016 with the nice wide sidewalks. So that's got tremendous potential as a gateway. So that area could be enhanced. But I don't know about Summer Street, what we could do other than those sidewalks.
Maybe what we're talking about then is changing Summer Street, not making it orange, but making Hudson Street orange down to the river. I don't know where River Street comes out onto Hudson Street. Wherever that is.
Yep, right there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So make that from there back up to the red, make that orange, and then I'm not sure, make Summer Street just yellow or something, or I don't know what you with Summer
Well,
Street. Or just take
Are we
Summer
getting
Street.
rid of all the other stuff, or are you gonna give them the green, the yellow, the orange? Or are you just gonna give them the red and the orange?
Well, I think, I don't know, my sense would be to leave the other colors, just to let them know that these are areas of town that, people on the committee thought had some connectivity or some, even though they may not be part of the business commercial part of downtown, that, we should be considering making sure they're seriously considered in some sort of connectivity to the downtown. Maybe yellow and green are connectivity types of things. Red is primary development, revitalization and Orange is secondary revitalization,
Mhm.
something like that.
Whitney Street over here probably won't get redeveloped either because that's all residential.
And I
Right.
think that was just brought up for historical purposes. Millie, can you speak to that? I think maybe you and
Yep.
Norm, maybe Norm gave you some input about this historic nature of that part of Whitney Street.
Yes, basically that was the key of that.
But probably there wouldn't be much of a redevelopment opportunity there. Just once again, from a
No.
wayfinding standpoint, that could be something else to point out, that if you follow this path down here, you go past, the parsonage and things like that.
Mhm. Yeah.
So maybe as the secondary priority, we could stop the orange at the intersection of Whitney and Church.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just don't want to confuse them and say, okay, well, what did you want to do with this section?
Yeah.
Say it's,
I have a question about the process here. So Lori, when we hire this consultant, I mean, they're gonna come and walk around and as Dario frequently points out, that, people see things through different eyes. And I think it's important that we tell this person that we're flexible to, that these things are not set in stone.
Right.
Right. I think that the key part of the downtown revitalization is you want to focus where you have that mixed use, because you don't necessarily want to be encouraging people to just be walking around to look at the pretty houses,
Right.
What we want is we want people to spend their money in the downtown. So we
Mhm.
want them to go visit the civic uses, go to the library, go to the town hall, but we really want to drum up business for the commercial enterprises that are there. Residential is a key component of that because the people who live within a 5-minute walk of the downtown, chances are going to walk to those commercial and civic uses. So they're our draw. But the area where you really want to concentrate in my opinion, the kind of the revitalization is the areas where you want to see commercial activity. So if you don't want to see the historic homes on Whitney Street demolished and replaced with office buildings, then probably that shouldn't be the focus.
Right.
That shouldn't be the red area.
Could I speak?
So,
Yeah. Go ahead.
sorry,
Go ahead,
but
Jim.
I guess I see we have two aims kind of at a little bit overlapping here. And one is the walkability issue and to draw attention to the riverfront over to, the circuits that Dario talks about walking or something that both, people visiting the town as well as people who live here love to walk a circuit. So to keep Summer Street, connect to the park space, that underutilized park space on South Street, over to Gale, across to the river, up, around the waterway, like that whole circuit could kind of be like our complete streets, maybe connectivity focus, but then to draw people into the center of the downtown is kind of I think as Lori said, that's really where where our mission in downtown revitalization gets us. So perhaps, we could just kind of guide the consultant that way, that we really want this, walkable, lovely, attractive space that, people visiting as well as people who live here would be drawn to.
I think when we do a master plan, the very beginning part is called the programming. And we define that really as problem seeking. So if we were doing this master plan, we would interview this committee and whomever, and we look for three things, which is in every master plan. We look for the facts, which is what we have. That's the physical features, whether it's rivers, roads, railroads, whatever, busy Route 20. Then we look for the rules. You know, what are we allowed to do? You know, can we acquire this land? So they understand what's called a do and a taboo. We can't touch this. We may be able to do that. We absolutely want to do this. And then we ask the goals. What do you guys want to do? And what Lori has said, if our goal is to attract the houses around the downtown to come to the downtown, to make the downtown more vital, the first thing I would do if I was doing the master plan, which I haven't even thought about it that way, is I would try to connect Westbrook and Liberty Drive to the downtown. Because now you're going to bring more houses. There's nothing you're going to do on School Street to make them come downtown, because they're already going to be coming downtown. They're so close, they're going to come there anyway. But can we get the people on Pleasant Street to have a more enjoyable way to get to the downtown? Now you're going to be bringing in 50 other homes. Anything that's within 5 minutes of downtown, they're going to go downtown. You don't have to convince them because it's so easy. The key would be, can we get someone to walk 7 minutes and double the use of the downtown? Because that path from West Main Street, where it's yellow there, even, it becomes a nicer walk. And then boom, that whole neighborhood now comes downtown. Because if I live on School Street or Summer, I know I can get downtown. But everything we do isn't going to make the other 3 people that aren't going downtown walk downtown when they're so close. I would say, hey, if we really want to get the downtown to be exciting, get the people that live on River Street to show up, the people that live on Pleasant, and maybe as far out as Westbrook. Now you're tripling the houses with accessibility to downtown by making it more attractive. If that's our goal, and that's what that master plan consultant, that's what they will do. They will ask, what are our goals? And if that's the number one goal, they'll want to reach out a little further to get those walkways down Hudson Street, for example, with all the people that live on River Street to get there, or whether they come down Route 20, then they'll decide which is the better path to get there. Or they may say, how do we get, Westbrook to downtown? It's not a huge extra distance, but it's 100 more homes. So they may take us that direction if that's our goals. So hopefully all this will come out when they interview us, because that's when we say we want it to be revitalized. We want it to be more active. We want to draw more people. And the key to draw more people, you don't have to draw the next door neighbor over to your house. You got to get the person that's 3 blocks over if you want it to be more vital.
Yeah, I guess my thought is we're sort of closing at 9 o'clock here, and we have one more thing to do. My sense is if we include some orange, as Lori suggested, that sort of makes it apparent that we want the river to be more involved, in the discussion here, kind of thing. This idea of primary and secondary, keeping the orange up to the intersection of Whitney and Pleasant for now, and then adding some orange down Hudson Street to the river, making sure that that gets brought out. And I think maybe leaving the rest of the map the way it is. If nothing else, once the consultants get involved with that, they're going to ask questions about, well, what do people have in mind for these other areas that are coded in different colors, and it bring out some of the discussion like Dario brought up. So as opposed to kind of dropping those ideas, they'll just sort of come out in the initial discussions that Lori and the committee has, with a consultant that we hire. So my sense would be maybe we kind of leave this map the way it is, and we include a little more orange to make it more apparent that we want some serious consideration of the waterway there. And, maybe, like I said, leave the orange up to the intersection of Whitney and Church there. And then we can either leave it continually orange the rest of the way, or just change it maybe to yellow or green from there, up to Pleasant Street, just to make sure that point that Dario raised about possibility of making those neighborhoods around Pleasant Street more accessible to the downtown as part of the project might make sense also.
And I agree with you, and I think that will all come out with the master plan when they come on board. So I think what we present them here is not cast in stone. It's just, hey, folks, here's our opinion. They'll dig in, they'll ask the questions, and we'll get something really cool. So I mean, Rick, I'm 100% on board with that, because they'll figure it out when they start interviewing us.
And once again, the whole idea of this was just a preliminary thought from our committee to them. To your point,
Exactly.
Julianne, none of this is cast in concrete. We just wanted to give the consultants some sort of a starting point. And it looks like this is kind of where we're going to end up.
And I think it's important. I think we learned a lot, if nothing else, by going through this. That's huge, because we bounce a lot of stuff back and forth, which is really productive. So when they do start the process, everybody here's had great ideas, and I think that's awesome. That's what this is all about.
Yeah. All right.
Maybe what I could do is I could do an additional map. So I could do this one, provide that to the consultants, and then I could do an additional one that just has 3 colors. So it has the red, that's the primary study area, the orange, that we discussed the revisions, that would be the secondary study area. And then I could do another color, like say yellow. And those are the areas that we want to ensure are walkable, accessible to the downtown. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, we could do that.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Now in that map, should I drop off the blue areas and just concentrate on the green and the yellow areas and the areas that we demoted from orange as being walkable? Or do you want me to include everything that's currently a color and call that walkable?
I would say for now, let's include everything. I mean, people had ideas in mind when they voted for these things. So let's include everything yellow that's not orange or red.
Okay.
I'm fine with that.
This thing will get winnowed down as we go through it.
I think that makes perfect sense, because if there's something to walk to, those of us over on Westbrook Road will walk there.
Okay. All right. Why don't we do that? And maybe for the next meeting, Lori, you can, have ready for us to look at the second map.
Absolutely.
Okay. The last thing that's on the agenda tonight, it says reorganization, but this goes back to the last meeting. Ashley had indicated to Lori and I that based on her new job, she just didn't have the bandwidth to consider continuing being the chairman of the committee. She said she'd like to stay on as the vice chair. And we talked about switching the roles between Ashley and I, where I'd assume the role of chair of the committee. Ashley would become the vice chair. We discussed the fact that pretty much everything that's done is done as a 3-way conversation outside of these meetings between Ashley and myself and Lori, and that would continue. And there seemed to be some general agreement at the last meeting to go ahead and do this, but we wanted to make sure other people that weren't at that meeting got to hear this, and we postponed having a formal vote on it to this meeting. So before I ask for a motion to do that, is there any other comment or input from anyone about this proposed change to the officers of the committee?
No.
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 Hearing none, can I hear a motion that we change the offices, that Rick Leaf becomes chairman of the MPIC and Ashley Davies is the vice chair?
Do we have to have separate motions? Vote on the chairperson and then another vote on the
Yes,
vice
it should be
chairperson?
2 separate motions.
Okay.
Okay,
then
so
can I
I
entertain
move that, oh, sorry.
Go
I
ahead.
move that Rick Leaf be our chairperson for the MPIC.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion on that? If not, let's take a vote on that motion. Let me get my cheat sheet out here again. Okay, Julianne,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Millie,
Aye.
Jean,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Rick, I, Dario,
Aye.
Fran,
Aye.
did I forget anybody? No. Okay, that motion is approved unanimously. Now I need a motion for Ashley Davies to be the vice chair of the committee.
I make a motion that Ashley Davis be the vice chair of the committee.
Is there a
Second,
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? Hearing none. Julianne,
Aye.
Amy,
aye.
Millie,
Aye.
Jean,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Fran,
Aye.
Rick, I, Dario.
Aye.
Okay, so starting with the next meeting, that's how we'll do things. And in the meantime, as we've done in the past, in between meetings, Ashley and myself and Lori will get things organized in between meetings. Is there any other business to come before the committee tonight?
Rick, what is the timing of the RFP being ready to go out? Are we closer to that?
Yeah,
John,
so
I'm just waiting for John Kader to complete his review. So he hopefully will do that within the next couple of days. And as soon as he does that, I will immediately submit it to the 3 publications that I'm required to submit to by law. And then once it's released, once it hits those publications, then we'll give a 3-week turnaround time for the consultants to submit proposals. And then we'll start the selection process, which will probably take a couple of weeks.
you weren't present at the meeting at the time, John, but Lori had suggested a subcommittee to review the RFPs and make the selection process, which the committee agreed to. So we're going to have a subcommittee of Lori, myself, Ashley, Amy, and Dario that'll work together to review the RFP responses and make a selection of a consultant. And the RFP responses, when they come back in, will be publicly available, so committee members will be able to read them and comment on them if they so choose. But we'll have this subcommittee make the selection.
And then can I
Okay.
just ask for our next meeting, we talked about the third Thursday of the month. That puts us out 6 weeks. Do we have anything that we need to do between now and then that's too long, or does that actually work out really well with the launching of the RFP?
I think the latter of what you mentioned is the case. One thing we discussed briefly before we met officially was that we really want to start to maintain the third Thursday of each month from now on. We've been a little bit scattershot the last couple of months, but for everybody's benefit, we'll try and stay to the third Thursday of each month going forward.
I think that's good because everybody can plan accordingly in perpetuity.
Right. And we'll just see, as long as we get a quorum, we'll keep meeting and keep moving forward with everything. So good. All right, having no other business coming before the committee, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
Okay. Can we just by consensus say aye and be done with it?
Aye.
Okay. Thanks a lot, guys. Good meeting.
all right, good
Appreciate it.
night.
Good night.
Good
Good night,
night.
everybody.
Bye.